Well, melted so fast. Guys, welcome back indeed for the best rogue guide. So let's go ahead and get started with what is the biggest change and how are we basically one-shotting things and also getting infinite energy with a new broken thing that has been discovered in the community. So starting right off, just want to mention, in case you guys are watching this and you haven't seen the 1 through 50 guide, I will also link that down below, but this is mainly focusing in on 50 to 70 plus, because in order to get some of these Wrathful Hearts, it's going to take a little bit of time, but you can technically get them earlier. But the main focus of this is basically talking about how good the barber is, and while the barber is arguably one of the best, it's not actually broken. And the reason why I put that in quotations, what actually makes it broken is actually on the skill tree. There is a passive that actually makes this thing actually broken. So for whatever reason, consuming shadows counts with barber. That's how I have infinite energy, and a lot of people keep on asking again. I know right now we have a shrine, but it'll go away. You'll see that we pretty much have infinite energy. And the reason why every single time an enemy dies via shadow damage, we're supposed to get energy. Now the barber will actually activate that, and this is actually pretty big because that way you don't really need a generator. However, if you want to earlier on, you could still use puncture to apply vulnerability and also apply a slow, so you can get more damage to, let's say, crowd controlled enemies or take less damage. It kind of helps out, but you can drop it completely later if you want to. But this is what actually makes it so broken. So really quickly, let's go over what are the bigger changes from 50 to 70. So it really comes down to the pieces of gear and trying to get some of the best stuff that you can get in terms of the rolls. So let's go ahead and start off with the important things. And in the gameplay, by the way, guys, you guys don't see perfectly rolled gear. I'm just showing you guys over on max roll what is the things that you want to go for. Like, I still don't have Penitent Greaves in the gameplay, and I still have 0 cooldown reduction. We're actually getting cooldown reduction a separate way, and I'll explain this in a moment. So before, through like the progression of 1 through 50, usually you want to stick with Inner Sight. You could still play with it. It's still a fantastic option. However, later, getting preparation is actually really good because you're just essentially getting your cooldowns back, and because you don't need energy for the most part, with the exception of maybe on the bosses. But once you activate your ultimate, which actually did get a buff with the Aftermath passive, you get more resource. So pretty much when it comes down to the boss, just spend all your energy, activate your ultimate, get basically full energy, and then spam your abilities again, and the boss will usually die. So you don't really have too much resource problems, but this just activates so you just have basically more movement speed, because then you can dash more, you can use your shadow step more frequently, and it's just nice to actually have extra cooldown. And because you have basically almost unlimited energy, and again, that's what makes barber super broken. So starting right off, the most important thing is actually getting the barber. Now it depends. Here, let's go over here so we can actually see how the barber interacts. So you want to get the barber, which is a Wrathful Heart. You're only allowed to use one, and it scales in item power. But what this does, and I should actually explain this first because this is the biggest jump in power that you're going to be getting from, let's say, like the earlier stages of the game to 50 to 70-ish, the mid stages of the game, going towards the end game. You're going to make it so critical strikes and all subsequent damage within, it's kind of like a charge up, but its numbers are 2 to 4 seconds. It gets absorbed by the target, then the absorbed damage erupts into surrounding enemies, and the storage damage gets increased. So when you group up all the enemies with your ulti and it pops, it's just going to do massive amounts of AoE damage, which is excellent. But on top of that, it gets increased in terms of the damage. This is super good just because you get more damage, but again, because it actually works off of one of the passives, that's what essentially makes it broken and gives us unlimited energy. So you don't have to attack the target until it dies. Just throw it a couple twisting blades, just walk away, it'll blow up and it'll do massive amounts of damage like you're seeing right here. Everything will eventually just kind of pop, and that's what makes barber super good. Now, as far as the other Malignant Hearts, other great ones that you can choose, oh gosh, we have to actually click on each one individually because the way it's like coded, I guess, in here. All right, so the other great one that you guys can actually look for is specifically getting not only the barber, but also getting the Tempting Fate. This makes it so your crits will actually do more damage, but your non-crits deal less damage. Since you're going to have several hundred crit multi towards the later stages of the game, this is not a really big deal because the sacrifice is less. And on top of that, there's actually another like bug in here, or just really strange gameplay mechanics. So it says we have 85, like at the highest roll, we get 85 crit strike damage. However, that's not actually true. It actually gives you more than that. It's some sort of weird type of multiplier. So it actually gives you more than 85%. So keep that in mind as well. It might be scaling with something else. There's a video on Rob2628's channel that actually kind of shows this off, but yes, it gives you actually more. So this is the other heart that you kind of want to go for. And if you want to go for more offensive defensive stats, you can, but I think that the other best in slot would be revenge. So going over like the best hearts for this build, because you're going to be kind of acquiring these as you progress, you definitely want to get the Caged Heart of Revenge. This is going to give you extra damage reduction, and then on top of that, the suppressed damage is amplified by 250, and it does some sort of fire damage. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing is just getting that suppressed damage. So those are basically the big power spikes or defensive spikes that you'll get in this build, but you really want to try to get the Barber. That is the most important one. I remember Apothecary, me saying that this one might be kind of good because it's kind of like the best rogue one in terms of like for the classes when I was reading them in the earlier stages when they first got announced, but the Barber is just on another level for this. Again, and since it gives you unlimited energy, it's going to be a very hard sell to compete with pretty much anything for most builds. So now that we got kind of the hearts out of the way, let's go over the pieces of gear and the important stuff. And keep in mind, in the gameplay that you guys are seeing, I have 0 cooldown reduction, except for, well, preparation gives us flat numerical cooldown reduction. So starting right off, the important pieces, and I'm still going to mention getting cooldown reduction is still going to be good, but I don't have any in the gameplay. So as far as our helmet goes, the most important stats that we're really looking for is that additional maximum life, getting additional armor, and then cooldown reduction is kind of great. And then if you get energy, that's good. You can also get some sort of damage reduction if you want to. And then in terms of our chest piece, we're just looking for maximum life, and we can also run the aspect of disobedience to get for some extra damage reduction. For our gloves, the important things is to get is that twisting blades. You want to get attack speed, crit. Eventually, you can actually get lucky hit if you want to start scaling that, and that's kind of for the later stages of the game, because later Temerity is getting a massive buff, and I'll briefly go into like the level 100 one here, but I'm going to kind of reserve that for its own video because Temerity and all these other buffs that I'm going to be talking about are not actually live right now. They're coming out on August 8th, so I'll give you guys kind of a head start to kind of know what to get for gear. This way, you know, I still plan to make like a level 100 max guide, but because I can't show off the gameplay, well, we're going to have to wait for that because the update hasn't hit yet. Next up, in terms of the pants, dodge is really good, damage reduction from close enemies, and also taking less damage from crowd control enemies if you happen to have the Penitent Greaves, or if you're still using your generator or the basic skill, because it technically doesn't give you extra resource, but puncture is still great for applying that slow, and then you can also get less damage and actually move a little bit faster. And then Penitent Greaves are the best in slot for the most part, because getting the control with another 10x multiplier on this and another 10x on that, it's massive. And then for our crossbow, what you're really trying to get is all of the good rolls. That's vulnerable damage, crit damage, core skill damage, and then getting dexterity. These are all great. You want to throw your aspect on your twisting blades for this, the dancing blades, and that's going to give you a massive amount of damage. And then for the amulet, the most important thing is really getting that cooldown reduction, movement speed, energy cost reduction, damage reduction from close. My amulet is absolutely garbage in the gameplay, and I'm still running literally just a legendary, not even a sacred one in the gameplay, and we're still shredding stuff. But if you want to get extra damage, that's totally fine as well. As far as our rings, you're really looking to try to get that crit strike chance. That's the most important thing. They drop in terms of ancestral pieces of gear. They're going to drop with +5 as the highest roll, and then you upgrade 5 and you get that 7.5. You really want to try to start scaling crit towards like the end of the game, and that's one of the most important things, especially for your rings, because the only way you're getting your crit is basically with your gloves as well as your rings here, and you're pretty much looking for the same thing. So crit, vulnerable damage, and crit strike damage, and then getting life is kind of nice. As far as the aspects on the rings, it doesn't really matter too much. It's kind of an empty slot. Like getting the one where your basic attacks increase, that one's okay. You can get the increased damage when you stand still. You can get pretty much whatever you want. It's kind of open here for the rings. Unless you're running the barrier one, then you can get bonus damage when you have a barrier. This is after Temerity gets its buff to actually work properly with barrier scaling things. But as far as our weapons go, pretty much the same. Crit, vulnerable, core. And then I like getting the one where you're able to get more crit. You're going to start getting pieces of gear that is going to give you a lot more crit. This gives you basically 9% extra crit for pretty much the entirety of the game, with the exception of during boss fights, because, well, there's only one thing to apply vulnerability to. And then, crit strikes with cores is going to increase your attack speed. And then as far as the skills go, just puncture, dash, death trap, dark shroud, twisting blades, and shadow step. You can drop your generator if you want to, and if you want to run instead, you can run concealment. So this would be kind of like the change. As far as the Paragon board goes, let's go over the skill tree first, and then let's briefly go over the Paragon. So as far as the skill tree goes, this is what I like to run. So in the earlier stages, again, you're going to want your generator or your basic skill, and then you could drop that later. There's nothing too different here from 50 to 70, although I like getting this concussive. It is great, and you actually want to swap your advanced over here, and you're going to want to get the ones that actually apply daze, because then you can actually knock them down and get extra crit. In the earlier stages, though, you want the other one because, well, you're not going to be scaling this because you simply just don't have enough crit to really make it actually viable. But once you start getting some of these, this could be excellent for you. And if you want to run concealment over your generator, keep in mind that's totally optional. And again, I'll link, there's like 2 different variants. There's one where you can play with concealment, one where you can play without. I recommend starting out with concealment because it does give you that additional 40 energy when you activate it. But later, if you want to drop it, once you get the barber and everything set up, feel free to do that. There's going to be 3 different builds in the pin, and it's kind of up to you and what you want to run. And then getting consuming shadows, this is what, again, this makes Barber broken because, well, it just happens to give you free extra energy, which is massive. Now, only grab the Frigid Finesse if you have Pens and Greaves. If you don't, well, you can put it elsewhere. Just get extra damage if you want to. There's this one over here where you get to get extra movement speed. That one's good. Or if you just want to put some extra points into whatever, if you want to, you can get this one where it's just like the dash. That's another option here. But it's kind of up to you on this if you don't happen to have Pens and Greaves because, well, if you're not chilling things, this doesn't apply. And then I really like Momentum. It's been getting so much better because of the nerfs overall to your gameplay in terms of like your cooldown reduction and everything. Giving you extra energy is great. It does help out even though you already have basically unlimited energy. Getting extra damage reduction is good. Another option that can be great is Victimize. If you still want to play with the poison traps, Exposure is still a great option. There's not really a bad choice here for the rogue. Precision is not going to be advisable for this build because, well, you're not using marksman skills to really do damage. The marksman skill is just your basic skill. And as far as the Paragon board, earlier on, this is kind of what you're trying to shoot for. So Closer is excellent earlier on, and then because it gives you damage reduction. Closer and Turf are great, but you really want to try to get Exploit as soon as you can. Exploit is the most important one. So grab Exploit first, and you can mix and match. You can put the Exploit first if you get it first, but Closer right here, ideally, because it just happens to have more dex, and then this one over here scales off of Strength. So Exploit is fantastic. You want to get this. It's one of the most important things. And then earlier on, I like to get Tricks of the Trade, and you'll see it in the gameplay. The reason why is there's nothing else for the small amount of points that's required over here to actually give you a 25x multiplier. If you want to, there's other options where when you activate your ultimate, it gives you 10x multiplier, but this is a 25x. It's kind of nice to have earlier on, but you can swap this out. You can see that there's going to be multiple different Paragon boards, ones where we use all the points and ones where it's kind of part of the progression. So again, check the pin. Now, briefly going over to what I want to briefly talk about. If you get Temerity, this is important because it doesn't have this newer buff now. The new buff is coming out on August 8th, but I'm just trying to give you guys some knowledge here. If you get Temerity right now, it's still going to be bad. Later, when you get Temerity, it's going to roll with plus life, and the barrier is going to scale off of your life. So you're going to basically get almost double of the effect of Temerity, and then we can start running something a little bit different. But if you get some Temerities now, they are changing the legendary power, so it still will be okay to get a Temerity and keep it, because it's going to scale off your actual maximum life versus your like base stat life. To explain it, I'll probably have to upload a video so I can give you guys a comparison, but basically it's a massive, massive buff, and it's going to be good. And then we can start scaling things with barrier, because right now it's bugged or it's just not working properly. They're updating it on August 8th to make it so like when you have barrier, you get these bonuses. They actually work. I didn't even know that these were bugged where they don't even give you the bonuses when you have a barrier. So that will be changing very soon, and there's going to be other things that we can do with barrier, but that's going to be for like level 100, and we're going to start scaling Lucky Hit, because now you can get Lucky Hit with barrier and it will actually work properly. So that's going to be a major change, and that's going to actually help out with Siphoning Strikes, which is something that actually got nerfed pretty hard, but is actually getting a little bit of a buff on August 8th. So that's going to wrap things up. I told you guys pretty much what to go for your pieces of gear, as well as kind of what to look out for. And we'll be updating the guide consistently, so check the pinned comment as well as the description box for the build link. And that's kind of what you want to do, is try to min-max, get the best rolls on your pieces of gear that is specifically vulnerable crit. And if you don't get everything perfect, like, you know, I might not have the perfect amount of vulnerable on every single thing, but you still want to try to get that stat. And as you start scaling, you really want to try to focus in on getting crit strike chance as well as crit strike damage, as that's going to be a big source of your damage, especially with the Malignant Heart, the one that gives you extra bonus to crit damage, but in your non-crits deal less damage. And if you get this too early on, you're going to start not dealing damage. Ideally, at least 40% crit will make this really good, but eventually you're going to get more, and then this also gives you 9%, and then when you use your Shadow Step, it's an additional 8%, so you'll get like over 50. Once you're over 50, yeah, this thing is just going to be absolutely way better for DPS. But that's going to wrap things up. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment, and I'll try to reply to them, or I'll update it in the part 100 video. But subscribe if you guys want to see that part, as well as the updated one once that is released. Catch you guys in the next video. Have a good one, and I'm signing out. Peace.